Good evening, everyone. My apologies for the delay in starting this evening. We had some technical problems, but I'm happy to be online now. First of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Avril and I'm from the BD in Scotland. So our focus tonight is very special because tomorrow there will be the celebration, which is the 17th of September, of course, and it's a very special day for us. It is the BSL Scotland Act 10-year anniversary. So 10 years ago tomorrow, we were in Parliament and the bill was passed. So such an amazing time. We've got various people coming in tonight, various guests to talk about their experience, reflecting on the past 10 years. And we hope you'll have an interesting evening. So again, apologies for the delay, but we will try and crack on with our guests. So, as I said, it's the anniversary tomorrow of the BSL Scotland 2015 Act. So we will run through a variety of guests, and I hope you'll find it really exciting and interesting this evening. So first of all, we're going to show you a short video of that momentous day when the Scottish Parliament and the MSP sitting in the debating chamber passed the bill. Take a look. I find it difficult to explain actually how I felt that day. I think when you consider, a deaf person growing up without having that language recognised, having been there in the debating chamber when that vote passed. Oh, apologies. It seems we're having some difficulty with the sound at the moment. Please bear with us. So as you can see, that was the Scottish Parliament that day that the bill was passed in the debating chamber. And unfortunately, we had some issues there, but if we can go back to who was involved at that time and has worked tirelessly within BSL, I wanted to come and introduce Lillian Lawson. Welcome, Lillian. Hello, Lillian.
Hello, Beth.
So I wanted to welcome you in to our BSL Blether tonight. I wanted to ask you about the BSL bill and how did you start getting involved in the work that you did?
Okay, so Avril, I'm missing a little bit there, but I think you were asking me how I got involved. I was part of the cross-party group on deafness that was established. And we were initially going for the recognition of BSL, which was being worked on through this cross-party group. And then we worked on it, and there was a decision made to go for it. Then that motion was brought to Parliament, and they proceeded through it. And the recognition was the first stage, but then we had to come back to a consultation on what it would look like. So there was a subgroup established with just a questionnaire with some questions, with 4 different questions, and very straightforward. So the response rate was quite good. We got only 2% objected to that first stage, and that was 2011. Then after the election, there was a change in leadership. But the bill had to go through different stages, and we managed to get enough supporting it. Then there was a lot more work involved. Apologies, we're having some technical issues tonight. That's freezing a lot. Then there was a call for evidence. And for the first time ever, they put that through Facebook. That had never happened before. Graham Turner from Heriot-Watt University decided to put that on Facebook because it was a medium that people were familiar with, and there were lots of videos put on there. Then they went to the school of Falkirk, met with deaf children there. There were adults, meetings, different focus groups. And that's how the evidence was brought together. And there were 3 debates in Parliament for each stage of the bill. Then at the final reading was in September the 17th, 2015, and the decision was made to approve it, and it became an act on that date. Very emotional day.
Yeah, I remember that day. It was so important. Yeah, and it was emotional, of course, yeah. So looking back, Lillian, do you feel it's been a positive piece of legislation? How do you feel? Can I just double check, Lillian, that you can see me okay? So I was just asking, over the last 10 years, have you felt that the Act has made a positive change for everyone? Now, I'm not sure if Lillian is seeing me at the moment. My apologies. So again, just asking Lillian, can you give us any idea of the positive change you feel the Act has made?
It has definitely gone well. Some successful examples of success would be interpretive provision has increased, and the rest of the UK don't necessarily have that, but now we're guaranteed. And a lot of that has made a real difference. Some of the things I would love to see in the future would be more of an emphasis on education, because deaf children need that and need that access in BSL to their own education. And that's not just for deaf children. I think all children in society should have access to BSL as part of their formative education.
Of course, thank you. So can I ask Lillian, do you have a message for those people watching in the audience tonight? What would you like to say?
I'm really sorry. It's freezing too much for me. I'm not really following what you're saying.
Do you have a message for our audience tonight, Lillian? What's your final thoughts for perhaps the next 10 years? I'm not sure you can see me.
The video is just freezing too much. I'm not able to answer your question.
Just bear with me, please, Lillian, just for a sec. We're having some technical issues, unfortunately. Can you see me okay, Lillian? We have some broadband issues at the moment, unfortunately. My apologies. Can you see me okay, Lillian? No.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Can you see me okay, Lillian?
I see you, but it keeps freezing and then the picture stops.
So if you can see me at the moment.
It's gone again. I'm sorry. It's just completely gone again. It just keeps freezing.
Okay, let's just hold on a second. We'll try and resolve this.
Any better? No, it comes and goes.
Okay. Sorry about this, Lillian. We're just trying to resolve the issue in the background. Okay. So I believe Lillian has frozen for me now, unfortunately.
I don't know if it's my issue, actually. I've no idea. Sorry.
Perhaps if you can see me okay, Lillian, at the moment, can you give me the thumbs up?
Well, I see you and then it just stops. It keeps freezing for me.
Okay, why don't you just leave the room for now and you can join later, perhaps, if we have time. Okay.
All right then. So what we'll do now, I'm really sorry, we've had a few issues there, perhaps broadband issues, but let's move on to our next guest. And I really do hope that Lily will be able to join us again later. Our next guest this evening is John Dennerly. Hi, John. Can you see me okay?
I can, Avril. I hope you can see me okay as well.
Oh, it's a relief after all that. That's great. I don't know what's happened this evening. Okay, John. So you've been involved, very well-known counsellor for quite some time now. Tell us how you got involved in that area of work and what it's been like for you.
Of course, yeah. Well, I've been in Scotland for about 22 years.
Wow.
And obviously, I had a love of politics and campaigning. I worked with, obviously, the British Deaf Association and different lobbying. So it was just a passion of mine, really. And when we had the BSL Scotland bill going through Parliament, I was involved in a working group with different organisations. We had deaf people come in, different hearing professionals as well, and we discussed the bill a lot. I'm sure you remember yourself, Lillian was involved with the cross-party group, and I did some of that work. So yeah, I think we started to see influence happening then. And the MSP at that time, Mark Griffin, took it on to put that through Parliament. It was raising awareness of BSL. And finally, on that fateful day, 10 years ago tomorrow, we got in the debating chamber, it was passed. And it was so emotional. There were tears, I have to say. And the fact that Scotland were the first to do that in comparison to Wales and, Ireland and England. So yeah, I felt really proud, actually. And I live in Dumfries and Galloway in Kirkcudbright, and I'd been involved in politics, and at that time, do you know what? I want to get into politics and become a councillor. And I wasn't the first deaf person. There was another councillor before me. So I got access to funding. And you might know Grant Ferguson. He himself was a BSL councillor as well. So at that point, there were two of us. So I believe there's now three. But yeah, so we're growing that community. So it's been great, just to get involved in social care and health and so on, and to challenge the system. So it's been fab.
And I'm really think it's incredible that we've got that, and do you feel like that was part of influencing the act coming in then?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that helped certainly gain momentum because we've had the first BSL plan and we're now on to the second one. So that first one, I think having it there as part of the national plan was great to try and encourage BSL within democracy, and just to encourage that collaboration with politicians has been great. And now I think we just see more momentum. So it's been great to have deaf people involved in that in Scotland. I did get access to the elected office fund, and that certainly helped me. They provided funding. It is administered by Inclusion Scotland. So they administer that fund, and it helps you with campaigning, with communication. So it just provided a fund for me to get into politics. So it means if there's any debating, any meetings, if I want to do any work in my area, then that fund covers costs for interpreting, for example. And without that, I'm not sure if there would be any access for BSL users to be involved in the political landscape in the way that we currently are. So it's been really popular. It's been really, popular and productive to have that fund.
And well done, John, in all those years of public life already. So what do you see for the next 10 years moving forward? What would your vision be for the deaf community in Scotland?
Oh, I think these last 10 years, it started to develop. We've planted the seed, and that is certainly flourishing now. It's growing. I wouldn't say we've got flowers on that yet, but it's certainly growing. There's buds there. And I suspect the next 10 years we'll see much more change. I think deaf people's lives in Scotland will be enriched. I think we'll get more access in society. I hope democracy will continue to flourish, and we'll see more people encouraged to get involved in the political landscape and to consider getting, whether that's a local election or something like Holyrood. Who knows? We'll see the elections next year. I wonder if people will be interested in standing for election. So that's certainly a name that I would like to see in future.
John, thank you for that. That's really inspirational, and you're a real role model for other deaf people out there, showing us how to get into politics. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Avril. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah, keep an eye out for any developments there, and we will keep putting information out on Facebook, for example, and other political parties, but any debates that are coming up. I think it's really important that deaf people are involved in that, so that we provide different perspectives, whether we agree or disagree in areas of public life that has been debated.
And before you disappear off, can I just show a quick photograph of yourself?
Oh, thank you.
Elia. Oh, lovely to see you there in the official setting that you've been working in. It's amazing to see that, and to think of all the roles that you have fulfilled, and I think the wreath that was there of all the poppies, all of that you've been now. Well done, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Avril. Thank you so much for inviting me along. Good luck for the next 10 years. Thank you so much. And for the next.
Thank you. So that was great to have John involved this evening, to think about becoming a councillor and working as a councillor in Scotland, and then his involvement in the Scottish Act. The next guest wasn't able to join us today and has sent a video. So that will be Frankie McLean. So have a look at what Frankie had to say.
Hi, everyone. So that day that the BSL Scotland bill was passed in Scottish Parliament, I was there. I remember being in the chamber, and the feelings I had, I suppose, were mixed. Of course, I was happy because, I come from a family of BSL users. It's my culture, it's my identity. And to have my language finally recognised in that way was very powerful. I do remember being a wee boy and signing and fingerspelling to my family, and particularly my grandfather, who was deaf and a BSL user. But he would regularly try and get me to stop signing if we were out in public. And as a wee boy, I didn't quite understand what that was, but it would seem my grandfather and others were a little embarrassed when signing in public, which is sad back then. But I have to say now that's very, very different. I think we're proud to show our language, and that's been so powerful, in comparison to my grandfather's time. So very lovely. At the same time, though, although I was happy, I did have some fears, because while the act was great and was powerful, it hadn't resolved everything. It hadn't just improved everything overnight. Not at all. We still needed to do the work. We still had a long journey ahead of us. The act was only the first step. So it's important that deaf people and our allies work together to support each other, to collaborate and to help move things forward, and continue to lobby and continue to promote BSL and opportunities for the deaf community. So I think that's really important. I see the act as a tool, but the work is up to me, up to you, up to us, deaf people, to make sure that things happen. And back then, so I definitely had some mixed emotions that day: happiness, fear, wondering if everything would be achieved. But, things have been good, I have to say. It was good to get that piece of legislation. Personally, I do feel very lucky because it's afforded me opportunities. I now work within Scottish Government. Initially, my first role was as a BSL policy, and that was my first role in government, and I felt really proud, actually, because it was an important role. And I remember that first week going along to the government building, and the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to ensure that everyone working in government knew about BSL. They knew about sign language, they knew about the Act, and they knew what they needed to do to move forward and to make sure there's access for deaf people. So I did my research. I identified many people who had responsibility in government, and I met with them one-to-one. And I have to say, everyone was so interested in BSL, in the legislation. And I really did feel like a salesman, not a car salesman, much more of a language salesman, trying to sell the BSL culture and identity and signpost them to the BSL signing community. And I felt that that was really important. I wanted to make sure that people were able to raise awareness and promote the language, and to use the Act as a tool to ensure that they were aware that we had legislation, and to keep them updated on that. And of course, everyone was so interested. They all wanted to learn BSL. So those were important meetings for me to share that information. Now, I was in that role for 2 years, and I have to say the first year was fantastic and it gained momentum. Sadly, the second year provided us with COVID. So we know that a lot of things had to go on hold at that point. And that was just unfortunate. But at the same time, I do think we also had small wins during that time. You remember that First Minister had daily briefings, and we had interpreters with First Minister during those. So there were small wins, but of course we know that COVID had to shift focus, and we understand that. Post-COVID, there was another opportunity for me that allowed me to get a promotion and to focus my experience somewhere else. That was in anti-racism. Very interesting area of work, and I became a team leader. And it wasn't that I wanted to ignore the BSL that I was so interested in, not at all. I did feel that as someone working in different area of government meant that people could see that deaf people could do whatever other hearing people could do. People could become teachers, they could become tutors of BSL. My own team, my colleagues that were around about me could see that I, as a BSL user, as a deaf person, could be in a position of leadership. And it meant that they could see that deaf people, BSL users, could do the same as everyone else. And I wanted to try and make sure that filtered through government. It also gave someone else the opportunity, with me moving up, gaining promotion, that the BSL policy position was available. So yes, I feel that the Act has provided opportunities, but it meant that in my roles, I was able to be visible and to show that people can be who they want to be. They can become teachers, they can become BSL tutors, but whatever they want to do, they need to be prepared to do the work. We know that there are so many hearing people out there who want to learn sign language, but we don't have enough BSL tutors. So we need opportunities for deaf people themselves to learn to become a tutor, to teach sign language or whatever it is that they want to be in life. And yes, I feel that the BSL Act has been fantastic. It's a great first step and it has allowed changes to be seen, but we need more. We need deaf people themselves who are BSL users to grasp those opportunities and to run with them and to make things happen. Thanks so much. Well, thank you, Frankie, for that. Thank you, giving an account of his journey over the last several years. So there's some positives there, absolutely, but we still know that there's a long way to go. So thank you so much for Frankie providing that. It's just unfortunate he couldn't be here in person. Now, I wanted to show you a photo. Let's just look at this now. Now, these photos are of Erin and Christers. And they are two young people. Now, after the BSL Scottish Act, it opened the door for people to get involved in politics. And we had the Youth Parliament. And both Erin got involved, and also Christers was involved in the Youth Parliament as well. So the legislation opened the door for both of them to get involved. So that has been really positive, particularly for young deaf people to get involved in the Scottish Youth Parliament. And we hope that we will encourage more deaf people to get involved in that. So yeah, congratulations to both Erin and Christers. Okay, I want to introduce Mark McMillan now. Welcome, Mark.
Hi there.
So, Mark, can you just introduce yourself and let everyone know what your role is?
Hi, I am Mark McMillan, and I am from Dumfriesshire, which is a really rural area, and then moved to Edinburgh mostly because of work opportunities. I've worked in the Scottish Parliament for 6 years now. Well, 2 years full-time. And this is a great opportunity to let people know that I work for the Scottish Parliament, not the Scottish Government. People still confuse the two. I don't work for the Scottish Government. I work for the Parliament in Holyrood.
Of course.
And that's where the MSPs are. So I work there.
Thank you, Mark, for that clarity. Okay, so you work in Scottish, so Frankie works in Scottish Government, you work in Scottish Parliament. So when the bill passed in the Scottish Parliament, and sorry, before we go into a discussion, I wanted to show a photo before we start that. There you are. Lovely. Wow. Yeah, you still look the same, Mark. You've not changed a bit.
No, I don't think so. I think I was a bit younger and different looking then.
So when you look back over your time over the last 10 years, what do you think has been achieved, really? What's been important for you?
Well, that picture shows me giving evidence in one of the evidence sessions about my opinions, my experience, and what it had been like for me going through university, some of the barriers I'd faced, all that kind of thing. And fast forward, and I'm now working for the Scottish Parliament. And I have to thank the BSL Scotland Act for that. That's what made the opportunity available for me to work for the Scottish Parliament. I think on reflection, when I was in the debating chamber that first time, when the bill was being approved and moving towards Act status, I was there. It was a very emotional day. And you've had some of our other presenters saying something similar. I found it very emotional. If I give you a little bit of a background to myself at that time and what was going on in the chamber, I had been working for Deaf Action as a youth participation officer.
Yeah.
And my role was to ensure that deaf young people were given the opportunity to influence what was going on around the BSL National Plan. And the way that that was done was by setting up a Youth National Advisory Group, YNAG. And then young people came together and they put together their plans, and that influenced that piece of work. It was so emotional for me because on that day, all I could think was all those young people that I've been working with now had a legislative framework that would enable them, who are the ones who are going to be around for longest, to have an influence. Life for me now is getting shorter for them, hopefully a good long time ahead of them. They are the ones who will be driving this forward, creating access, making all the difference out there in society in Scotland.
Of course. So is there a couple of things, Mark, you spoke about the last 10 years, anything in particular in your role that's you're achieving?
As part of my work in Parliament, I have helped to disseminate the national plan, and I'm part of the outrolling of that. 4 or 5 years ago, I was very proud that I helped the Parliament to establish a website with BSL resources available on that, all in one place. I'm also proud to say that I was able to establish the Facebook group for anybody who wanted access to proceedings in Parliament. They could see that in sign language via the Facebook medium. And it meant that it could go out as a video because public service providers needed to be aware of the fact that if it's sign language and it's being presented that way, that's great, but it needs to be a two-way process. If people are going to respond, they need a channel for that and a medium for that. And then we had BSL Hub, which was established for staff who were interested in learning BSL.
Interesting.
And that's really important. And now over the past few years, we have staff who are starting to get confident enough to engage directly with deaf people. They can welcome visitors into Parliament themselves directly in sign language. They are now doing that themselves. And yes, we need interpreters, but they're doing all of those bits and pieces that make it feel like a visit where I, as a deaf person, know that other deaf people are welcomed. I have other examples, but I'll leave you with those.
And also, Mark, didn't you set up FMQs to make sure that you were providing news thereafter in BSL to the community? So thank you so much for that, ensuring that FMQs are accessible to the deaf community, that Parliament is more accessible, and you've opened the door for future resource. So thank you so much. Any final message that you'd like to say to our audience? I know we've looked back, but thinking about the future.
Very similar to what John said earlier on. I'd love to see a deaf MSP in the future. And I want to see a young deaf NSP, someone with fresh attitudes, a really different view on life. And I think that the door is now open for that to happen. We just need deaf young people to have the right opportunities and education in terms of political life, what it involves, what the rules are, how to become an MSP. And that's a bit of work that is ongoing. We're in the the second national plan now. So we're looking at ensuring that we provide the relevant support and resources for anybody, a young person or anyone else who wants to become a deaf MSP. Because traditionally, Parliament has had blind MSPs. We have had MSPs with mobility issues. They've all had it, but we don't have a deaf MSP yet. And I think that needs to be the next step that we're moving towards. And I think, as Frankie said, what we need to see is people actually engaging with deaf people on a regular basis so that deaf people realize that BSL is part of public life. And now that MSPs are starting to sign for themselves, the staff are starting to sign for themselves, it is becoming more possible and real. And then we have to look at the political parties and the processes and people to start to identify so that the society out there who will vote, the voters, will select a deaf MSP because they see them standing up for what they believe in. So that's what
I completely agree with you, Mark. That's lovely. Thank you so much for providing your view on this, and good luck with all your work as you move forward. Thank you.
And thank you for having me along tonight.
Thank you, Mark. Bye.
Okay, that was so interesting what Mark had to say there. I think we do need to think about having a government and having a parliament and ensuring that deaf people are working as part of the infrastructure in either of them. So now I'd like to invite Alison Henry to join us.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
So Alison, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your experience is of the bill then becoming the Act.
Well, my name is Alison Henry, and I'm originally from Glasgow, but I moved to Edinburgh several years ago. I was involved in the BSL Act really many, many years ago. I suppose my role's very different now, but when I look back at the last 10 years or so, I started my involvement working at Deaf Action with Mark, who we've just spoken to. And I was also, he left and I was a youth participation officer. So yeah, working with deaf people, providing support basically to the YNAG and so on. So my role, my title changed throughout time. I worked with various colleges and universities throughout Scotland with the first national plan.
And then you saw that, and then you had a new role in the university in Edinburgh.
I did.
Tell us a little about a couple of things that you realised were achieved through that.
Well, when I moved from Deaf Action, I went to work for Edinburgh University. And my role at that time was working, as I said, with universities throughout Scotland. And, you know, that was the first time that that role existed in the university. And it was about 3.5 years. I really thoroughly enjoyed, as Frankie mentioned before, during COVID, that had a huge impact on everyone. And although I was able still to work and support, it was more difficult. Yeah. Obviously, I moved into perhaps training for staff, also students, because we had some deaf staff as well as deaf students. And also I was able to establish some summer schools. There was various events, and there would be deaf or hard of hearing young people would consider going along to those. And I would just encourage them to get involved and see what support they needed and make sure there was appropriate access. So I was involved in all that work actually. And through time, we certainly increased numbers. So that was really lovely.
Massive achievement.
Yeah, I feel that, you know, I was able to do so much, and that has now really garnered momentum through university.
So that's a lot that you've achieved throughout that time in the university. If it hadn't been for the Act, do you think that would have happened? Even that role would have been possible?
I think it would have been certainly more difficult. I don't think people would have had the exposure that they had and understanding and, you know, that visibility. So students, for example, I think are now more confident to get involved in university. And I would like to see that get even better as we move forward over the next 10 years. So it's nice that we can see role models there now.
Absolutely. So we've had 10 years so far. What about the next 10 years ahead? Have you any concerns, thoughts, hopes? What are you thinking?
I suppose when I look back to that day in Parliament when the legislation was passed, uh, I think it actually opened the door for me. It gave me exposure as well. And working with Mark and Frankie, I remember us going along to the debating chamber that day, and having that passed was just amazing and so emotional. And in the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of changes for the deaf community. But I think things will still take time. I don't think we're there yet. We're on a journey, as colleagues have said. I think it's difficult to change overnight. We won't see that, but we've started. If we get the right people involved, we can, like Frankie, Mark, John, myself, people that are involved in this area of work, I think they're representing communities, and that's fantastic. So if we can continue to gain that momentum, I think we'll see much more change in future.
And I really do hope, Alison, that your work in the university continues to thrive and flourish. And so much support has been given over the years, and it's such an important role. And that's the next generation. And so much more work can be done for deaf students. So thank you for all that you've gone and done. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone. Okay. Now, next, I wanted to introduce Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte.
Charlotte, would you like to tell us something about yourself and your involvement in the bill and the act over all these years?
Well, as you said, Avril, my name is Charlotte, and 10 years ago, I was working in a nursery school with deafblind kids. And of course, I'm from Glasgow, born and bred, grew up there. And when the BSL bill was going through Parliament, I wasn't there, sadly. I was in work. So I didn't see that pass. So I was really nervous that day. My heart was pumping. I was trying to text family and friends. And when I got the message that it passed, I was really emotional, but we didn't know what was going to happen next. Yeah. And I remember we knew it wasn't going to be overnight. We knew we wouldn't see change overnight. But the messages started to come out. And then, of course, the government wanted to set up the National Advisory Group, the NAG. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to apply for this. And after an interview, I managed to get myself a position on the NAG, and I was co-chair myself with Deborah Werrett at the time. Yeah, Deborah. So she was deafblind and I was the deaf representative. So we co-chaired the NAG, and it was fantastic to work with everyone. Really lovely time. So we went regularly for meetings, and that lasted probably 18 months. I think there were 5 NAG meetings during that time. Public bodies were part of that. We had health boards involved. Police, of course, yeah, you're right, Avril, police were involved. Various services came together with deaf representatives to discuss the national plan. So when the bill had passed, basically the first national plan was blank. It was like, right, why is it blank? We wanted it to be fresh. We wanted it to be new. We wanted ideas from everyone. So when I think about the discussions we had back then, they were so interesting, discussions per just different perspectives from the deaf community, different perspectives from the public bodies that were present throughout the NAG meetings around the table. And I think that really helped deaf people as well understand the route that services would have to take, because of course we were saying, right, we want X, Y, and Z right now. But the public bodies had to explain to us and basically teach us how those services worked and how we would try and gain access. So I really learned a lot through that time.
And it sounds like a very collaborative two-way process. So that was the first BSL national plan, the first one, with 70 action points in it.
Yeah.
And you came together as a group and looked at that. And I actually have a photograph of you.
Oh, no.
Was that you? Did you find yourself in that photo?
I look very different though.
Okay, so you all came together and it was a mixture of, tell us about the kind of people who came along.
Well, at that time, we had representatives, for example, parents of deaf kids. Now, it was a long time ago. We're talking more than 10 years ago. So, yeah, we had a hearing person with deaf kids. We had deaf parents as well. I think there was also 5 reps who were deaf themselves. 3 were perhaps deaf-blind representatives, and another 3. It's impossible to remember all the numbers, I'm afraid. But then we had the 3 young people as well. So yeah, it was a really lovely group. Everyone came from, different experiences, different
So,
backgrounds,
yeah, great.
but they were all confident enough to put over their perspective, which was lovely.
And it was the first kind of experience of being in something like that. It must have been a lot of really committed, strenuous work. Thank you so much to yourself and all of those who took that on and made this happen. And now we're moving into the next phase. Have you a message for the deaf community moving forward about the Act?
What I would say is that, as my colleagues have already said tonight, I think it's a bit of a slow burner. We need time to achieve all the things that we want to achieve. But my message to the deaf community is to keep going. To keep going. There are people out there who don't understand about deafness, but they might be the appropriate people to provide us with resolution. So, we need to try and be that support to aid their understanding, to let them understand our experiences. But again, it's a slow burner. But we want to make sure that those people who want to learn BSL have the opportunity to learn, because we know there's a lot of people interested. A lot of families need it as well, families of deaf kids, but there's no funding. And that's something I think that's important to look at in the future. Courses, family courses in sign language, just anybody wanting to learn, it's so expensive. So we need to make sure there's funding available.
Thank you for that. That's been really helpful. Thank you for your contribution this evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so thank you, Charlotte, for that. That has been a really important role that Charlotte has carried out. Not just Charlotte, but that whole group. The next person is going to be Margaret McLean. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Avril.
Margaret, please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and who you are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret McLean, and I'm from Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, basically. I am retired, yeah, but I, for many, many years, supported children learning BSL.
And you know that the bill then went in to become an act. So there's a couple of things I wanted to raise with you, Margaret. First of all, I know that deaf club in your area was something that your deaf club were actively involved in when it came to the legislation.
Yeah, I remember at that time at the BDA, concern was growing actually about BSL. And I know that there was, as John has said tonight, there was deaf counsellors, and I at that time was involved with Ayrshire Deaf Association, and I wanted to make sure we could get more people involved.
Right?
I just involved myself in different areas. I think.
When was that? Just this year?
No, actually, let me think.
Yeah.
I think it was perhaps in the January. I became the BSL chair, and I decided to continue that. Apologies, Margaret's breaking up a little.
So, Margaret, you were involved in giving the feedback on the BSL plan from your local area?
I was, yeah. I became chair of that group, and we discussed that as part of Ayrshire. And we just wanted to make sure we could look at the actions and gain momentum on the local plan.
And the Commonic Deaf Club had people coming in, and you brought lots of people in to give information, and then the numbers grew as a result of the information people were getting and the passion that developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was difficult to get people interested, although that did gain momentum. People came up with issues, and it was just bringing everyone together around the table to try and move things forward.
And I think it's really important to hear this story tonight, because the BSL Act actually isn't just a piece of paper that sits somewhere. It impacts right down into every deaf club on all of those services.
It absolutely does. You're right, because, if someone came to me in the deaf club and said, I want X, Y, and Z, I would say, well, go and ask for it. Where is your voice? Use your own voice. So if you want to change our lives, if you want to change access and make sure our lives are enriched, we have to stand up for that and make our voices heard. So you need to work together with everyone.
And you've seen changes, but they do take time, don't they? And I think there's a bit of patience involved in waiting for them.
Oh, absolutely. But, we've seen some changes already.
Margaret, I think that's really important, what you've had to say to us about the input of the local deaf club. And can I wish you all the best moving forward? And I'm sure that everywhere else in Scotland is looking at the work that you're doing at that level and realizing that this is a really important role moving forward, because you're representing people who have direct lived experience on a daily basis of what it's like to be deaf. And thank you for all your time spent working for the BDA and now your local deaf club and representing that group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avril. Night, everyone. Okay. So thank you to Margaret for that short discussion. We have several people still to get through this evening. Now, let me just double check who is coming in next. Now we will have Paul Hull. Welcome, Paul.
Hi.
Hi, Paul. Can you introduce yourself, your name, and a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Paul Hull, and I lived in Kings Park, Glasgow, and I work as a BSL Health Improvement Officer for the NHS for Glasgow and Clyde. And I've been in this post for 9 years now.
Wow, long time.
That time has flown past. Under the Equality and Human Rights team, and the focus is improving access for deaf people, and also ensuring that staff are aware of the BSL Act and their obligations under that Act.
Lovely, thank you, Paul. So do you feel that the BSL Act, that legislation that was introduced 10 years ago, has that helped your role in the NHS?
Well, I've been here for 9 years, and I've been treated in a very fair way. I work as part of a really good team, and I have a whole range of deaf staff here now. There are 6 or 7 deaf staff working in different roles all
Good.
across the place. And we need more deaf staff to come into the NHS, to be more visible within the NHS, because it's the language that needs to be seen. And deaf people can be involved and can make a real difference. They don't need to be seen as service users, they need to be part of the service provision. I think that creates a real message. And we need to be out there ensuring that doctors and everyone else knows about the Act, because they don't. And it takes a long time until that message gets out that BSL is a language and they need to think about it in their service provision.
Oh, now, thank you, Paul, for that. I think my screen was freezing a little. Could you talk about maybe 1 or 2 things that you feel, just briefly, you feel have been important over the last 10 years?
Well, we need BSL classes, BSL, we've got 400, 500 staff working in this area, and there is a lot of interest in learning sign language. A lot of the feedback I get is that people want more classes, they want it at higher levels, and I've had to refer them out to external college courses and other providers. And
Yeah.
also keen on BSL mediation.
Yeah.
So the role of a mediator is someone who works between people who are not happy with each other in terms of some problems. You have a deaf person who's been trying to get hold of an interpreter or has got a letter they haven't understood,
Of
and
course.
then they want to be able to use the remote service to be able to translate that letter for them, give them some information, and let them know what their rights and responsibilities are to support them in their complaint. Because far too many deaf people have felt lost within these systems. So
Yeah.
I can provide the support for them in sign language that they need.
So you feel that it's become more accessible for deaf people if there's any issues, making sure that there's interpreter, there's support available. Yeah. So you basically mediate between that environment. Yeah.
And that's only within the Greater Glasgow and Clyde area. There are other areas around there, other regions that need to follow this example and get the same result.
Absolutely.
Really important. And we need deaf people working within the NHS in all those regions too.
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you so much for that. And please continue with this fabulous work that you're doing to grow, particularly deaf staff. That sounds really fantastic. So you've spoken about the last 10 years. What about the future? What about the next 10 years for you?
I think I would say the same again. I really want to see more BSL classes available because so many of the staff here have told me they're keen to learn, but it's too difficult for them to find a class or the classes are too expensive. And I think that's become a stumbling block. It's something that we need. We need really good teachers out there teaching sign language in a lot more classes. That needs expanded.
Yeah. So you want to see your work continue? Absolutely.
More deaf doctors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds good. Yeah, well, listen, thank you so much, Paul. Carry on with your good work.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for your time. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you to Paul for coming along. Okay. Now we have the next guest coming along. We have Sandra. Welcome, Sandra.
Hi. Hi. How are you?
Can you introduce yourself, Sandra, and where you're from?
Yeah, my name is Sandra Duggett, and I'm from Northeast Scotland in Banff, near Aberdeenshire. Well, not the city, but it's about 70 miles further out. It's not Aberdeen, 70 miles further out from there.
Good stuff. Okay. So you're northeast, as you said. Yes.
Right up there, yes.
North of Scotland. Okay. So when you were in London, is that right? And you moved to Scotland, how did you feel? Coming to Scotland and seeing that the BSL Scotland Act was passed, do you feel there was an improvement from London?
I have been fascinated watching the other presenters this evening. I always remember people celebrating the act, and at that time I wasn't well at all, and I remember thinking, what's the big deal? I didn't really get it. Anyway, I was in London, and then I moved up to Scotland, and I thought, well, maybe the act will help me because within the northeast area, services are really far behind where they are in the Glasgow, Edinburgh side of Scotland. But I do believe that the BSL Scotland Act has helped me to challenge when I needed to.
Yeah.
So in London, I would get interpreters for my GP appointments, and in Scotland, I had to actually recommend that people read the Scotland 2015 Act, and it actually did make a difference. People did take that on board and did provide interpreters. Same with my dentist. I had to cite the Act, and that helped me. And if it hadn't been for the Act, I might still be living in London because I would have been put off living in Scotland because I couldn't have had the services that I've got. And I'm really grateful for what the Act has done for me. And also Contact Scotland has been incredible. I live in a really rural area where it's very hard to get hold of interpreters. So that's enabled me to make any phone calls I've wanted. And the fact that that's been a funded service has made a massive difference to my life.
That is really positive, actually, Sandra. Thank you for mentioning Contact Scotland. So you've been provided with access, which is great, but still a long way to go. Yeah.
Not in a rural area like this, they're still a long way behind, but it's getting better. It's improving. Aberdeen itself has a lot more going on. There's a lot more deaf people, deaf clubs, networks. You know, if you go in the Maury area, in the rural areas, there's pockets where it's better, but the deaf community are very spread out. And because they're so spread out, then it's hard to get the momentum in those rural areas. And I kind of have to go on a case-by-case basis and fight for what I need.
Okay. So you've talked about the last 10 years moving to Scotland. What are you thinking about the next 10 years? What would you like to see?
Well, in terms of the phone system, you know, it's only Scotland that I can phone make calls in, and I'd love to be able to phone around Europe and the rest of the UK. I'd love that remote interpreting service to be available so I can make calls anywhere. It's only within Scotland. And I think that will affect our lives because we need that funding to be made available. And also access to work is for people who are currently working. But I think there's a lot of volunteers out there doing a fantastic job, can't take up opportunities because interpreters aren't funded for volunteer settings. And that's a very specific area because I have volunteered within the sign health community in the past, and now it's the film 42 points and all that. I really want to see that get PR out. I do this in a voluntary capacity, but I need interpreters, so I need this funded. So thanks to the Scottish Act, it has helped Screen Scotland provide funding, and things are going better since then.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Sandra. That's been really interesting, particularly because you're able to comment on living in a rural area in Scotland and how difficult that is.
No problem at all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now. Now, apologies, Avril's screen had frozen for a second there. So we're moving forward, nearing the end of our BSL Blether. And I wanted to bring our next guest in.
Hello. I'm just thinking of this incredible news. It's spine-tingling news for all of us that the Scottish Bill has been passed and become an act. It's incredible. A couple of things I wanted to say. 125 years ago, the BDA was established because of education and language, and we're celebrating that. And at the same time, we have that at the same time as the Scottish Bill goes right through and gets passed. And I think we need to think about Mary Brennan, who did all that research. And the key element was that she identified that BSL was a real language. And the information that she provided for us enabled us to move forward. And then Jock Young, who was chair of the BDA, set up the BSL TTA in Durham University, which meant that we not only had a language with information about the language, but we were given the tools to teach that language. And, you know, we need to get back to taking on, and it means that as deaf people, we now have a bill that means people can take on responsibility themselves. I'm 71 years old, and finally my language is on a status with anyone else's. And I think for many people, you know, we could talk about many people we could thank, but we need to really thank BDA Scotland. We need to think about Avril and the team that she has there. All of you in the deaf community who fed back throughout that process, gave evidence, put all your videos in. So many videos were sent through, and that is what made the difference. And now the bill has been passed. The work has just begun. It's almost like we have a frame, but we need to fill that in with all the bits of the puzzle. Join with the BDA in doing that and ensuring that deaf children have a future that is really going to be secure because of this bill. That step's been achieved. Let's see what the future holds.
Oh, lovely Terry there. I think his video is so important actually because he was very involved in campaigning for recognition, and he was delighted and so very proud when that was passed. So it's nice to see lovely Terry there. You know, I'm sure he's looking down on us, and he's a proud man this evening. Okay. Now, linked to Terry as chair of the BD, now I want to invite Robert Adam, our current chair of BDA.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Did you see Terry's video there?
And thank you for, yes, I did indeed. Thank you for inviting me to join BSL Blethers tonight. It was an honor to see that because I joined the board in 2016 when Terry was still chair. So I had that experience of working alongside Terry, and it was great to see him, but it brought back sad memories as well.
Yeah, how lovely. Well, again, thank you for joining us this evening. Do you remember that day when the BSL Scotland bill was passed? Can you give us a little account of what you were involved in?
So when the Scottish Parliament approved that bill and passed it on that day, I was there and I saw, well, I wasn't there, but I saw the live stream. I saw it happening. I thought it was great. I thought it was really fun to watch. I really enjoyed it, but I was living in London. I wasn't living in Scotland. And so I thought it was brilliant. I watched it with a lot of interest. I thought, isn't that wonderful what the deaf community are going to be able to achieve? And then we've gone through all of our presentations this evening, people telling us their story about life before, life after, and the community that is there in Scotland who've achieved this act and will continue to thrive moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So you moved to Scotland. And so what have you seen in the last 10 years then? What do you feel has changed, perhaps?
I think the profile of BSL has definitely been raised in Scotland. I notice that when I go into shops, on the buses, people sign thank you. They do, that's part of the profile. And one of the things that was said earlier on about, I think Frankie said that people were embarrassed about sign language and they discouraged you from using it in public. You know, and if you tried to sign to your parents, they would discourage that in public. And I think that profile is totally transformed and now people are happy to use it. Since I've moved to Scotland, one of the things I've also seen is going to my doctor's appointments. I have always had an interpreter provided for me. So clearly the message has come across, things have changed. People do identify it as a language. And I've also noticed that there's a really big cultural element. A lot of historical tours have that. And we can see that reflected in the Act, which states that access to cultural life. And so as deaf people in Scotland, we're able to celebrate the cultural life. And that's so important.
Of course, it's lovely to see that you moved to Scotland and you've seen things evolve in that time. So what do you think are the areas that we need to do more work in as we move forward?
One of the things that Charlotte said is that families need sign language because parents desperately need it when a child is identified as being deaf. And we need to really ensure that the government take on board this message that sign language for families needs to be at no charge to the family. You know, we have that there, but the language decisions really massively impact on young people, and that is not at this point in time. It's never been reflected in the Act. So we need some additional work done by the deaf community to lobby the government and ensure that that gets brought in. Because other languages such as Gaelic or Welsh, that is part of their legislative framework, that it's in the Act, so it's not in our Act, and the deaf community need to do that so that families of deaf children learn sign language at no cost to them. About our future is our heritage as a deaf community, that language gets passed on. And also, I think what's really important is that we think about deaf professionals, social workers, teachers of the deaf, interpreters, translators, those deaf professionals, language assistants in the school. The number of those needs to be increased and the capacity built around those professionals so that we see deaf people in those professional roles. And it's not just around training interpreters. There's, you know, a lot of work being done to train interpreters, increase that capacity, but we need capacity built within the deaf community so that more deaf professionals come through the system.
Thank you, Robert. That's really interesting. So as your role of chair of the BDA, what are you thinking about Scotland at the moment and how we move forward?
Everywhere all the time, but I'm allowed to express that preference that I'm so proud to be in Scotland and to see the work that's being carried on with the Scottish government, to see the really positive relationships, the funding coming through for different projects. And I think that what we can see there is that deaf people can see the expertise that there is now sitting within the country. And I'm so delighted to be here and to share with this evening. BSL Blethers has been fantastic tonight. Thank you, Avril.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for your input this evening. Okay.
So we've had Robert Adams, who's chair of the BDA, current chair of the BDA, talking about moving to Scotland and what it's been like for him and seeing the increase in the number of interpreters. So now I would like to ask, well, I'm hoping to have, maybe Lillian's going to come back. Lillian, are you going to come back again? And we can just finish off with you.
Sorry about that at the start, Lillian. I know we had some technical problems.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad it's just working now anyway. I've enjoyed watching all the other presentations this evening. It's been really fascinating.
Lovely. So I wanted to allow you to finish off our chat. Now, we spoke about the last 10 years, and I just wanted to get your thoughts about what we can do as we move forward.
Yes. 6 or 7 years, 8 years maybe, fighting to get it brought in place. And Charlotte's given some of the history of that. And then I think it does take a long time to implement. I think the University of Edinburgh is a great example of showing what can be done and some of the opportunities that are being created and greater access. My biggest concern for the future is that we don't have enough teachers. We're talking about children. Children need access to language, and that's English at BSL. We must have free classes for parents of a deaf child. If a child is ill, they get treatment for free. If a child is born deaf, then we have to think about families getting free access to learn sign language to support their child. And, it's great to see deaf counsellors nowadays. It's great to see staff like Frankie, people working in the Scottish government, working in the Scottish Parliament. But some of those people in the councils still, we could do with deaf people getting more senior roles, and also in local government, because I think there's a lot of influence comes that way through how taxes are spent. Those decisions are made by civil servants. We need more Frankies. We need more people who can do that kind of work and get into different departments, health, education, that kind of thing. And as I was watching tonight, I hope that a lot of other deaf people, and particularly young deaf people, are watching and realizing how much is out there for them to achieve if they choose to go down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to say, Lillian, thank you so much for everything that you've done over the years. Is there a last comment you would like to say? What would you like to add?
I don't think I should take credit for that. I worked with a lot of great colleagues. I really did. And I think that's what I would say. There was so many organizations, Deaf Action, all these different organizations came together. And I think that we were all working with the same goal in mind. And it's not just about one person, it's about all of us working together. And I think that's what I would want to say. So I think, we want to see the organizations continuing to work together in partnership. And I'd like to see more partnership happening. The Act there has still some weaknesses, and I think it is time to raise the amendments that need done to strengthen the Act as it stands.
Thank you. I remember that you were working in SCOD back then. Yeah. Any final things to say to the audience?
Just because we've got an Act doesn't mean that the work is done. We have to keep going for things. We need to get 100% society that deaf people should have. So there's a lot more work needs to be done. Let's use the Act, but also keep working.
We will try our best, Lillian, I promise. Thank you so much for everything that you've done, and we certainly try to emulate your achievements as we're moving forward. We keep looking to see what's been achieved, and we're so grateful for your hard work. So thank you.
And thank you for organising tonight, Avril. I've really enjoyed watching it. Thank you.
Okay. So we have met many guests this evening. Now, before we close our BSL Blethers tonight, there is one person who couldn't come along this evening, but we do have a video message from them. Let me introduce Audrey. We're just trying to set up the video.
Hello there, I am Audrey Cameron from Edinburgh, and I work in Edinburgh University. And my focus of interest is the education of deaf children and deaf adults. So I have specifically focused on researching into sign language with the education of sciences. And so I focused on creating better access. So I really want to celebrate the BSL Act 10-year anniversary. It's amazing to have got to this stage. I've seen a lot of changes over the past 10 years, particularly in terms of attitudes to sign language. I think in the past it was ignored, excluded, whereas nowadays people in general have a lot more respect for sign language than they used to. The first national plan that we had around the NHS and councils, universities and colleges was good, but it left out education for deaf children. And that is a really important area that we need to be addressing. And it's disappointing that that wasn't included in the first version. The second national plan has improved, and we now have the Education Act, which also has included BSL needing to be involved so that BSL and Gaelic will be there. So hopefully there will be a better future for deaf children's access to education through sign language. It is so important that that is there. And the Act will help us to change that situation. There's a lot of work still to be done. We have more deaf teachers joining the profession now, going through teacher training. But that process needs to be looked at because additional support needs to be given to deaf teachers. When they go through their training phase and through probation, it is very difficult for them because they have to start off teaching in mainstream settings before they can move on to teaching deaf children. And so the whole process of teacher training for deaf adults needs to be looked at and addressed. And we also need more teachers who are available, deaf teachers who teach in the schools. So I'm excited to see what the next 10 years hold. I've seen a lot of changes over the past 10 years, and let's see what happens in the future.
Lovely. Thank you, Audrey Cameron, for providing us with that video. We know that she is so committed to education, so I thank her and everyone else. Thank you to everyone who was able to join us this evening. Thank you to the videos that were sent in that we were able to show, and everyone from their hard work and just providing their perspectives on the positive elements that we've seen over the last 10 years with regards to the BSL Act. I really enjoyed it. We have a few messages that have been online. Here we go. So Stuart Parkinson is talking about the Welsh deaf community and going through the Senate, going through the Welsh Parliament. So it's an important question from Stuart, actually. And perhaps you need to talk to your Parliament to look to Scotland, to look to see what we were able to do to get some information there. I have to say the National Advisory Group that was established prior to the first national plan particularly helped, I think. That was a great opportunity for people to be involved in and come together. And that has been mentioned tonight. Also, the Facebook groups and networks that were shared as a part of that throughout Scotland. So again, that's another opportunity. So perhaps you can ask the BD as well for some support to look to Parliament and to help. But certainly we all need to work together. So I hope you've been able to elicit some tips from this evening. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves, and I hope tomorrow, the 17th of September 2025, the official 10-year anniversary of the bill being passed, I hope everyone will have the chance to look back over those 10 years and realise how special that day was. That for me, certainly, it was my language being recognised. It was so emotional. And I want to see us continue to fly that flag for BSL and for the deaf community, and to make sure that access continues to improve for the deaf community. And that public services, NHS, councils, colleges and universities, public bodies continue to strive and to include deaf people. And so I want to make sure that they're able to support us. And I want to thank everybody that has done so much work so far for their support, whether that's the Scottish Parliament, the government, everyone in Scotland, really. Thank you so much. I hope that we're in a position to continue to make gains, but also to be patient, to know that it can't happen overnight. But tomorrow, let's raise a glass, whether it's a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and celebrate the last 10 years of the BSL Scotland Act 2015. Thank you everyone again for watching. Good night.